We have Mike Frank, and Mike's a true business guy and ministry guy. He's done it all. He was the vice president of HR at Disney, over hundreds of thousands of employees. He was the senior vice president at a firm that was a venture capital finance type company. He was also vice president at another company that was one of the early backbone networks that started the internet. And he's also on a board member at the YWAM, and he started and is the chairman of Hope Center for Kids in Omaha, and I think he cured cancer in Africa too. But anyway, so Mike, thank you so much. Welcome, and just share your story, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Well, hello to everyone all over the world, I guess. And so I go by the name Mike, and I just want to let you guys know it's an honor to be able to talk to you and share a little bit with you. I've worked with a lot of pastors and church organizations over the years, and I know how hard it is what you do. And I just want to affirm you and bless you, and that you guys are doing the hard work out there. And maybe today I'm going to share some things that are going to encourage you. I hope so. I think my goal is to inspire you a little bit, and maybe make your job even more fun. So anyway, thank you for having me this morning. What I will share is that I don't have an exact formula that you guys can step by step go through. What I'm going to do is put some creative ideas in front of you so that it'll spark something in you to maybe think outside the box a little bit, or think a little bit differently about the people in your congregation that are marketplace people, and how to get more connection, how to get more effectiveness, and just get them into their calling, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I'm going to share this morning. That sound okay? All right. Okay, so background wise, I'm kind of bivocational. I spend probably over the last 20 years the majority of my time actually coming alongside church leadership all over the globe, from Israel to Canada to international organizations that are based here in the United States, to churches. Some of the names Glenn shared with you. I was with Mike Bickle at IHOP in Kansas City. I was the COO there. I helped start his board. I was the first board chairman of Mike's organization. We lived in Redding, California for 7 years. I was kind of a part-time teacher at the Redding School. That's where I met Michael. In fact, I had these classes I was doing called Entrepreneur Boot Camps, and Michael came to one of them, and that's how we kind of started connecting more and more. And I was with him right in the very beginning as he was dreaming this whole thing up, and helped support him in that dream. So Michael and I go way back. So that's kind of a little bit of, kind of some of my qualifications here. But my personal story is that I'm 67 years old, been married to my wife for 43 years, and we have 3 children. I have one child who unfortunately died at about age 4, and it radically changed my life. I'll share maybe a little bit more about that later. But I didn't get saved until I'm 38 years old. I grew up Catholic and didn't really have a personal relationship with Jesus. And so at this time, at 38 years old, I'm vice president within PepsiCo. PepsiCo owned Pepsi, Frito-Lay, and a bunch of restaurant chains. And the Lord found me there. My marriage wasn't going so great, and it saved my marriage. So if you do the math, I've been Christian for about 31, no, I guess it's 29 years. Let's see how good my math is. Anyway, My focus over these last several years, though, I had a really, really solid foundation in business. So I worked for some of the companies that Glenn talked about, but I also worked for General Mills in Minneapolis and New York. I worked for PepsiCo in New York, Dallas, Los Angeles. I worked for Walt Disney in Burbank. And then I started two telecom companies, one that we sold in 1997 for 14 billion, and another one that was built just for internet traffic that got sold recently for $35 billion. So, I mean, played in a big game. Since then, I cashed out when my daughter got sick and eventually died. I went on sabbatical and never returned. But I started doing more and more kingdom work that held a deeper sense of purpose for me. But I took a lot of the principles that I knew and attained in the business environment and started tinkering and modifying and started really helping a lot of what I would call not-for-profit businesses. So that included things like the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, the Hope Center for Kids in Omaha. But I've also done some that you guys know of. Like I mentioned, Mike Bickle, YWAM was brought up, Jesus Culture, a lot of local churches. So anyway, that's kind of been part of the journey. I've been an investor. I've been a coach. I've been leadership development consultant. I've done a lot of things because I can kind of pursue the passions that I want to pursue, and God's really kind of called me into being what I would call a guide. So that's where I spend most of my time now is just guiding other leaders and trying to help them get to the highest level of performance they can get to, whether that's in business or in ministry. But I will tell you this: that the one thing that I've kind of um, landed on is it's really a question of perspective. But my perspective is I'm more of a kingdom guy than I am necessarily all about just serving one local church. Okay, so a lot of the language you're going to hear me talk about today is really more kingdom focus, and it might be local church focus, and that's just kind of the way God's orientated me. But I think it's going to apply here. I think there'll be some good stuff here. So anyway, I'm going to jump into that a little bit. So the topic that Michael Brodeur and Glenn and everybody else kind of laid out was to talk a little bit about how to develop, mentor, pastor, what I would call empower marketplace ministers. So that's really what I'm going to talk about. And so, kind of the best way for me to kind of open that up is with taking a look at this whole concept of kings and priests. I think there's in the scriptures it tells us, at least in Revelation 1 through 6, that God made us both kings and priests. And I'm kind of more king than I am priest, but I think we all can wear different hats. But the story that I'll use to illustrate kind of some of my points is the story of Ezra and Nehemiah. I think we all know that. Ezra was Ezra was in Israel and things weren't going real well. The walls had crumbled down. The city of Jerusalem was struggling to, keep itself safe, etc. You guys all know this story. I'm not going to teach on this too much, but Nehemiah shows up on the scene, and I would call Nehemiah more of a marketplace guy. Now, I know a lot of times all the Bible characters seem like they're these holy men that, they're all about, church and their full time is spent, thinking about God. But Nehemiah really wasn't that. I mean, mostly he was a marketplace guy. He was in the king's court and he was serving the king and he had skills and he had, watched how to govern and that kind of stuff. So by the time Nehemiah shows up on the scene in Israel at Jerusalem, he's a pretty skilled guy. And so the image that I'm trying to project here is that it took both Ezra and Nehemiah working together to rebuild the walls within Jerusalem. And I still feel in my heart that that's a good model. I have another example of that. This I mentioned earlier. I'm the chairman of an organization called the Hope Center for Kids, and it's an inner city. They're all Black kids. We serve about 150 kids every day after school. Give them a meal. They have homework time. They have spiritual time. It's a really nice, effective program. But that's not the point. The point is that it's the marketplace guys and the priest working together to create an entity that is really meeting a huge need within our city. And it's outside the church, I grant you that. But I do think that there's some things we can learn from both the example of the Hope Center and Ezra and Nehemiah that when we work in tandem, when we have mutual respect for each other, when we combine our energy, our resources, our intelligence, all boats get lifted. That old saying. And I really believe that's a word for now. I think that so many churches, so many church leaderships, and this isn't, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying maybe God's up to something different. But in the past, it's been kind of, these words like, full-time ministry or lay people or secular and sacred and, things that are kind of create some separation. And sometimes those words are good. We need to have some distinction. But most of the time, we're kind of after some of the same stuff. We're after advancing the kingdom, trying to find an increase in the kingdom. So anyway, I'm suggesting that today, with my time with you, that there may be some new stuff that we got to start thinking about. There may be some new approaches we've got to start taking. There may have to be some out of the box creative thinking that's going on here. So those are a couple of examples of why I think this is important. The other scripture that I want to bring up is out of Acts 26, verse 18. And it's open others' eyes and turn them from the darkness to light, from the power of Satan to the power of God. And when I think about that, who is better to pull off that activity? Meaning the guys that are in the marketplace, that's where most of the darkness is. Hopefully that you don't have a huge amount of darkness in your church and your church community, but out there in the world, there's a lot of darkness out there, and who's best positioned to address some of that darkness? I think it's the guys that are in the marketplace. And so I think this isn't a question of should we get them engaged? Should we empower them? Should we pour into them? Should we develop them in a more powerful way? I don't think that's the question. I think the question is how. So that's what I'd submit to you guys today, is that we got to come up with some new ideas, because here's the reality, and I can't speak for other countries. I know there's people from Canada and Germany, et cetera, on the call, in England. But in America, the impact and influence of the church has been waning, has been going down. And, it's starting to, every year, there's a group called the Barna Group out of Ventura, California, that measures this stuff. And every year there's been just kind of a decline in terms of how much an impact, the church is having. And that may not be true where you live. So if that's not true, I apologize. I do know this country. And so, I think that's another reason why there needs to be this embrace, this coming together, this connection between what's going on in your local church and what's going on with the marketplace people that are either in your church or that should be in your church. And so that's where I want to spend a bulk of the time. So that's just kind of my background of me personally and why this issue is important to me and why there's some evidence out there that says kind of what we're doing, if we just keep repeating it, probably going to get the same result. And I don't think that's where you guys wouldn't be on the call if you weren't open to something new. So anyway, so those are the fundamental problems as I see them. So, I learned long ago that don't just bring the problem to the table, bring a solution too, right? So part of this is, and Michael asked me to address this. He said, try to put get them to walk in the shoes of a marketplace guy and the language they're hearing, the behavior they're seeing from church leadership. How does that feel? And I'm not going after anybody individually. In fact, I'm not going after anybody. I'm just trying to answer that question of what does it feel? What might it feel like to a marketplace guy, right? And try to get you to walk in those shoes for a little bit. So, and this is from some of my experience, and this was from working with a lot of marketplace guys. In some ways, in the kingdom of God, first-class citizens are the guys that are doing church, that are paid full-time ministry. Those are first-class citizens. Most of the rest of us are second-class citizens. And that may not be true in your case, but that's kind of how it feels sometimes. I could go into a lot of specifics to back that up, but I'm just going to plant that thought there for right now. And there's another feeling there's several feelings. Sometimes we feel isolated and lonely because most of the topics that are brought up on Sunday or whenever, they're not really scratching where we itch as a marketplace guy, meaning, I know so many guys that are running organizations and their biggest issues are, customers, employees, meeting payroll, those kinds of things. And granted, you're not supposed to be the experts on that, but at least talk about it once in a while and acknowledge that that's what they're facing on a day-to-day kind of a basis, because Monday through Saturday, their world is very different. They're out there in the darkness. They're out there trying to build, trying to help support people, through jobs, et cetera. And sometimes they feel very isolated and lonely. And I'm going to share more about that in a little while. And the other thing is they feel like when they are engaged a little bit, the only thing they're ever asked to do is do church work, meaning, can you head up the usher group or can you sit on the building campaign committee or, those kinds of activities. And that's all good. We need those guys. But I can tell you right now, the capacity for successful business marketplace people is way beyond that. And if you're open to some new ideas on that, I think you can harness some of that energy, and I think the church is going to be benefited from it. All right. So the other thing is that it feels like they don't get a lot of time and attention. And again, that may not be true in your organization, but every church that I've been a part of, I've never had a pastor come to me and say, Mike, I want to meet with you. I want to hear what's going on in your world. I want to come alongside you. I want to connect you with people. I want to walk in your shoes for a little while. That's never happened to me. And so that's just another kind of a feeling that a lot of people get. And I think there's a fear too sometimes that pastors are worried about letting marketplace people talk at church on a platform because they're spiritually mature, or they might say something that is contrary to kind of what you've been saying as the pastor. And I think we kind of have to take some chances there and get over that a little bit. Maybe you've been burned in that area where you put a guy up there, he said something, you spent the next 3 weeks cleaning it up. So I'm not in denial about that, but I think if you can find a few guys, really make sure they're ready and put them up on the platform once in a while to speak. I think that'll make a big difference. Okay, so I'm going to switch. So that, Michael asked me to do that, to share with you what it feels like, and you know, how they see the world. I have a few thoughts though on how are you going to get these marketplace people a little bit more engaged, and that's really the key, you guys. I think you have so much talent sitting in your congregation on the sidelines because there aren't great on-ramps for them. They don't know how to engage and fulfill their calling, etc. So I'm going to spend a few minutes, if that's okay, for you guys to just to hear me out on this. And so here's what I want to share with you guys. I think there needs to be a little bit of a shift in terms of maybe attitude or maybe receptivity on the part of some of the church leadership. You've got some people sitting in your congregation, I know all of you do, that are successful at what they do. They're successful at building an organization, leading a team, teaching people life skills, um, solving problems, uh, creating jobs for people. And for the most part, they're kind of sitting on the sidelines and they're not, you know, actively involved. So the key is to acknowledge that they're there and that you got to pay a little bit of attention to them. And I'll explain that a little further. The other is, and this may be something you guys don't want to hear, because I was at Bethel for a while and, you know, sat under Bill Johnson's teaching. But when Bill and I would talk together, I would tell Bill, you're my peer. You're not like this guy up here at the top of the pyramid that all of us have to kind of come underneath and, you know, we got to serve only your vision, and you're my peer. You know, you're not superior. I'm not second class, you're first class. You're my peer. And he kind of looked at me pretty funny, like nobody's ever said that to me before. But guys, that's a shift. That's a mindset thing that you got to say. And in some ways, we've been all taught that, well, I'm the leader here. I'm the one who's, you know, got the hand on the wheel and stuff. That may be true, but you can't treat people like they're all, you know, somewhere down below deck in terms of acknowledging the gifting or acknowledging the contribution they can make. Okay. The other idea that I wanted to share with you is find a way to get to know them. I told you I never had anybody, a pastor, come and say, Mike, I want to come into your place of work. I want to hear what your challenges are. I want to know what problems you're trying to solve. I want to know what you think your gifting is. I want to know what you think God's calling you to do in terms of impacting the kingdom. Never had it done. And I may be an anomaly. I'll grant you that. But what if you guys picked 5 of your most influential business people? Could be men, could be women. What if you picked 5 of them and you picked up the phone or you sent them an email or a text or whatever and said, I want to come into your place of work. I'm bringing lunch. I'm going to stop on the way. I'm bringing lunch. And I want to do it at your office. We'll have lunch together. Then I want you to walk me around your office. And I want to hear. I'm listening. I want to hear, what is it that you're facing every day? And just that simple act, you guys, I think would go a long, long way in terms of getting them back in the game. Because this is, again, my observation. You got a lot of people that have a lot of talent and a lot to offer, but they're not engaged anymore. They don't feel understood. They don't feel empowered. So anyway, that's one idea that you guys could do, is to do something like that. The other is to ask them, how can I serve you? Meaning, can I connect you to other networks? So for example, I know people that do things in their own local church, but they're also called to do things on a global basis, meaning they're out there. I got one guy right here in Omaha. He's a house painter. He started buying rental properties. He's got a whole bunch of rental properties. He takes most of that money, most of that influence that he has, and he recruits little teams, and they go to places like Africa and Guatemala, and they build homes, and they do all those kinds of things. Find out what that calling is for some of those guys, and don't be afraid that if I turn them out, if I connect them with another ministry, or I let them, go out and do their own thing, that they're not going to help me in the church, and they're not going to give their money to my church. Don't be afraid of that. God, we don't serve a God that has a lack of resources. Okay. So another example is, we mentioned that I'm on YWAM's advisory board. YWAM has a program, not that, in Mexico, just south of the border, of the California border, where they bring in teams of business people to build houses over a weekend, right? So I'm not touting that. I'm not saying that's where you should send anybody. The point is, how can you find out what their passions are, their gifting is, their callings are, and match that up with networks out there? So here's the benefit. They become alive again. They get engaged again. They get off the sidelines and in the game again. And you're going to benefit from that long term. So those are just a couple of examples. The other is platform time. I touched on that briefly. The platform time, I had a church in Camarillo, California, Jubilee Church. Pastor, he and I started, getting to know each other a little bit. And he said, Mike, I want to have more dynamic marketplace guys in my church. I got a lot of great people, but I feel called to, that's a group that I know I can minister to. And he said, but I don't know how to get them in the door. So he said, will you help me? And I said, yeah. So you may not want to try this. I'm just sparking ideas for you guys. He gave me one Sunday a month for a whole year, where I did the message, the entire message. And I talked about things that are important to marketplace people. Talked about money management. I talked about time management. I talked about, building life skills. I talked about a whole bunch of topics that scratched where those guys itched. If you understand what I'm saying when I say that. And so he made sure that he said, okay, stay away from these things. And yeah, these are okay to talk about, blah, blah, blah. And when you do the offering, he coached me a little bit on how to do this. But the net result was we saw all kinds of new marketplace over the course of that year, all kinds of new marketplace, because the word got out that these guys are speaking my language. They're addressing issues that I want to. And I'm not saying that what you've done is wrong at all. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying for a season, and this is a challenge I have for you. For a season, what if you said, I'm going to point my energy, my creativity on addressing this issue of getting more and more marketplace people engaged in the game, activated, in love with the Lord, in love with other people, serving where they're supposed to serve. What if you did that for a season? See what happens. So you guys have all heard this term, the 80-20 rule, right? I'm sure everybody's heard that too. Well, the actual name of that rule is the Pareto principle. And it's 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your people. Wow. And you probably know that in some way. You know who your go-to people are, and you know, who are the people that get things done and who can you count on and blah, blah, blah. But what if you cast the nets a little wider and spent a little time cultivating these relationships with these marketplace guys and really got into their heads and really started, mentoring them in some way and connecting them etc. What would happen if you took somebody like that who's already very successful at building an organization or leading big teams, etc., and you got them turned on? I mean, the switch gets turned on. What might happen? What might happen in your congregation? It might be an astounding thing. I actually think it will. I think by doing that, you're going to draw talent, you're going to draw excitement, you're going to draw interest. And I think at the end of the day, I think the needle is going to move if you do that. But it's a risk you got to take. And I'm not saying stop doing any of the things that are working for you, but I'm saying in terms of your personal time, energy, effort, what if you did that for a season and tried this out? Try some of these things out. Another idea that I had was, if you have a missions department, a missions budget, and probably most of you do, um, what if you redirected some of that and it was focused on marketplace people instead of being focused on young people or, you know, people that have a certain gifting? What if you shifted that and said, we're going to go do a missions trip where guys that know how to build, guys that know how to teach on finance, guys that know how to, um, help people that are in different countries that are starting entrepreneurial things. So one of the proposals that I made to YWAM was, what if we created more short-term missions trips for marketplace guys where they could go for 10 days, they could use the gifting they already have. We YWAM's in virtually every country they want to be in. There's 240 some bases. Use that base as a place to say, hey, we're having an entrepreneur class. Anybody that wants to come from the community, come. And you bring in these Christian marketplace guys and they help them, get a business started. I mean, there's so many ways to do that. And so I've got a guy locally here. He's part of a church organization. He builds these storage units and apartments. He's probably one of the most successful real estate guys in this part of the country. Every year he goes to China and he teaches. He's hooked up with these people. The church is part of it now. He's been bringing people from the church with him, and they've been teaching how to set up your business, how to manage your finances. He's working within his area. He's so turned on. He's making gazillion dollars. He loves his local church. The local church is benefiting from that, both in terms of finances, excitement, and taking other people out and doing missions kind of work. So anyway, but this requires you to not care who gets credit. Okay, meaning if you're gonna turn him on to somebody in YWAM, you're gonna turn him on to somebody in the rescue mission, you're gonna turn him on to the Hope Center type stuff, you gotta not care who gets the credit for this. Maybe he's gonna do amazing stuff outside of your local church, and you gotta not care about that in terms of who gets the credit. Okay, but I do believe there's gonna be a real benefit to you and your church if he or she is doing those kinds of things, because the key is, are they activated, are they engaged, are they empowered? And you're going to see so many side benefits from doing that kind of stuff. So another thought I had was build some teams. So I'm a big follower of a guy named John Eldridge, and John, he always says, you got to get small, you got to get into platoons, you got to get into squads, you got to have a band of brothers. And it's very male focused. I realize that. But there's some truth in there. And the truth is that if you can get a couple of little SWAT teams, I call them, where you've got a few marketplace guys that can go into another business as a SWAT team, and they can go in and pray for that business. They can prophesy over the people and the business. They can just give encouragement and try to hear from the Lord and share that with these other business guys. How cool would that be? How cool would that be? The reason I say the squad it doesn't have to be exclusively marketplace people. It can be some students, et cetera, but pretty much led by marketplace people, so they can go in and do a quick reconnaissance of What is this business? What are their challenges? What's this guy facing? Now we can pray. Now we can prophesy. That to me seems like a very effective kind of a model, right? I'm gonna bring this in for a landing here real quick. So one of the others ideas that I had is start to become a student of marketplace Christianity if you haven't already. You know, there's stuff out there. Lance Wallnau's done a big thing on the 7 mountains. I know Michael Brodeur teaches on the 5 spheres. That all, by the way, they didn't invent that. Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham were really the guys that get credit for that kind of thinking, that model. If you don't know that model, go study that model because it's powerful. It's a powerful kingdom model. The other is I worked with a guy at IHOP. His name's Robert Fraser. He's got a book out there called Marketplace Christianity. There's other books out there, Kingdom at Work. I think that's, I'm not remembering his name right now. Ed Silvoso's got Anointed for Business. There are several resources out there for you guys to, if you really want to try something different, if you really want to, take a different approach, become a student. I know that you guys are all real students. Your heads are full of, what you're trying to teach every Sunday, and I applaud that. I understand how hard that job is. But I think if you want to go someplace new, there's an old saying that what got you here won't get you there. So if you're all about effectiveness, high performance, growth, seeing people get free and healed and all that kind of stuff, then I would submit to you that what got you here probably isn't going to get you there. I think it's maybe a time. And in our country anyway, COVID has been a real wake-up call in terms of how are we supposed to do this. So I think if that's your heart, um, you know, ask the Lord, but consider some of these creative ideas that I just presented to you and see what happens. So I'm done. Are we doing question and answer? Is that next?
Yeah, so we had a great question from Vicky, and it's a long one. So Vicky, I want you to unmute and share your question, and then let's tackle that because we already touched on some, but I think this is definitely worth getting into more. So.
Well, we're in Mexico and we're full-time missionaries. And just like the last several years, we felt like God's calling us to raise up marketplace ministers instead of, because it's been the easy track is send people, we've sent lots of people off to YWAM. We have our own ministry training school, but we've been trying to get people to think differently and change the idea that I have to go into full-time ministry in order to be in ministry. Right. But because we are in full-time ministry, I mean, we're traditionally supported missionaries, and we felt like God has called us to try to bring in some income and get into the marketplace ourselves. But even after many business courses, we're still pretty clueless in that area. But we want to try to train and model it, or can we train people with before we are able to model it, in order to encourage people to go into their passion in business or whatever their career choice is, and also use that as a way to resource themselves and their ministry that they have a heart for. Sure. So I just kind of like, how do we get started and how do we help people see that?
You're on the right path of, you're reading stuff, your mind's being open up to some new fresh ideas on that. But there's actually, they didn't do it last year, but there's a conference every year called BAM.
Yeah.
BA, and it's business as mission. And that'd be a great place to go to network and find out what other people are doing. I don't know if you have some contacts within YWAM, but in several YWAM bases around the world. And I've mentioned the one in, it's just south in Tijuana, just south of Tijuana in Rosario, where they're bringing in these business guys, and that's their full-time thing right now. Is that mission space is all about ministering to marketplace people, but getting them to do it in the context of building a space and doing shoulder to shoulder.
Mike, was that business as mission?
Yeah.
All right. I'm
Yeah,
gonna take a look.
yeah, I've known of it, and we've looked into that. We've also, I don't know if you've heard of Pedro Adeo, um, Kingdom Entrepreneurs. We've taken every course that we found, and we're learning a lot. We're not able to get ourselves quite yet launched into business, but what we really want is, how do we help to train the young people? We have a ministry training school.
Here's what I did at Bethel. So I wasn't really ever part of staff or leadership at Bethel. My wife went to school there, and I was more interested in the economy in Redding, California was horrible when I got there. So I started, and you could do this. I started this entrepreneur uh, group. We met every Friday. We prayed. We prophesied over each other. We invited as many entrepreneurs. I invited the mayor, the city council, the fire chief, the police chief. We'd invite these guys in. All of a sudden, this prayer room got filled up with marketplace people that cared about their city and cared about the governance of that city. Okay. The second thing we did there was I started what we called entrepreneur boot camps. Now, you may not be an entrepreneur, but you can be the organizer behind it. You just need one successful entrepreneur to be your main speaker. You guys facilitate it, you do the follow up on it. The way the economy works right now, guys, we are in what's called a gig economy, meaning young people, especially, are not going to have these traditional careers. They're not going to have, and in many ways, they have to go out and invent their own jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not going to, college is becoming optional in many locations because you can learn more on the internet than you can sitting at a brick and mortar building. So a lot of young people are gravitating towards that. Plus, they read stories like Zuckerberg or, the guy that runs Twitter, whatever, who those people are. They're heroes. They're like gods to them. They want to be entrepreneurs. A lot of them do.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to be the entrepreneur, but you can be the facilitator. You can be the convener. You can be the person who says, come. I'm doing a group right now. We're doing our second in Omaha called Entrepreneurs and Creatives of Omaha. We call it the Eco Network. I'm only in step 2 of this. I did the first one. I have a pastor guy that's doing it with me. We're trying, and these are believers. We're trying to get them so that they have community, so that they feel known, that they feel activated, that they feel that they have a role to play in our community. And
Mike,
those
Mike, can you talk more about when you do the boot camp, the entrepreneurs boot camp? What does that look like? What's that like?
All right. So we had a Christian college right next to where Bethel is in Redding, California. And I rented space over there. So we had a classroom space. In fact, they gave it to us. They were excited what we were doing. So I sent the message out, come to the entrepreneur boot camp, but you got to have an idea. You got to come with a kind of we didn't say business plan, but you have to have a plan, right? I don't want somebody and you may want to dumb it down a little bit depending on who your audience is, but they had to have an idea. So what we did we started all day Friday and all day Saturday, because most of these people work. So the only day they had to take off, we charged them a nominal amount to get in, just to pay for, we provided the lunch and that kind of stuff. Then I had a group of my buddies that were successful business guys come in, and I gave them each a topic and a time. And then we had a lot of breakout groups. We did, table talk time. We did time where they had to go away and work on some stuff. And then at the end, we had them do pitches where they were pitching their idea in front of everybody. And in fact, that's how pastorscoach.com Destiny Finder got started. Michael came to one of my entrepreneur boot camps, and we had a Top Gun award for the best idea and the best articulation of that idea, and Michael won. So I've been helping Michael with this since day one, since it was just a first idea. But you don't need necessarily have to be that person that has all the answers, Vicky. It can be you're the convener, you're the facilitator, the organizer, and it only takes one or two people. Anyway, I've rambled on too long on that.
That's great.
Well, thank you.
Actually,
That's really helpful.
right, James Shuttleworth, you got anything to add? I know you had something in the messages there. James, you guys anything to add on that real quick?
Are you sure it was me, Glenn? I'm not. I don't know if I made the comment. I completely
From
agree.
Adrian. Oh, it was Adrian. Adrian said James Shuttleworth and I have. Okay, so it was Adrian. Okay, Adrian, you got something to add on that?
Oh, no, I was just would love to connect with Vicky offline regarding, what we do in Flint with Flint Soup and how it really impacted. Hi, Mike.
I
It's
know
good
you do.
to see you. Yeah, and how we've simply leveraged the business community, buy-in from community,
Great
with their
example.
own $5 to micro grant and mentor and disciple. It's just such a simple model, and literally all you need is a few crock pots of soup and people with ideas that want to serve their community well.
Yeah.
It's just a really great place to start. I agree with everything that Mike says. And I share my own laments as what he was expressing. It's like, I feel really left out a lot of times too. God has equipped marketplace leaders to think really creatively. And it's like, I just don't want to write a check all the time.
Yeah.
I want to use my mind. I want to use my brain. I want to get involved. I want to help create structure and efficiencies. That's what like sets me on fire. It's like, I love this.
And there's a lot of
Um,
people in all your congregations that feel exactly
yeah.
that way.
Yeah, and so I was getting excited. I was like, "You're asking the right questions," you know?
Nice.
Um, yeah, I did have a question for you, Mike. We've been looking at a new model for our area. It's a new concept to us. It's not a new concept to the business world, though, for impact investing within the local churches, and what you think the role for the local church in impact investing is. The one thing that we've really got a lot of pushback over is, oh, well, we're not supposed to be in debt as Christians, and it's like, well, I don't know how to answer that. It's like because we use
Yeah.
capital as a tool. Um,
Yeah.
and
I've run into that, both that concept, and I've run into that pushback as well on that. And, the only thing I can tell you is that everything starts with hearing from the Lord.
yeah,
Everything starts with taking the question there and asking Him. Now, I will tell you this, that, when I was at Reading, there was all this talk about buying these Iraqi denaris. And I don't know if any of you other people got caught up in that whole thing, but people were taking out loans to invest in these Iraqi denaris. And that was wrong. That just didn't feel right because it was all about how do I create more for my consumption. But I think what you're talking about is impacting the community. Find a few key areas. There was a church down in the Saar area of Germany that I was at, and they invest in kind of an end times kind of a thing where they're storing up food, where they're storing up precious commodities as a church. I mean, they've got a big warehouse. So when the disaster occurs or the return of the Lord occurs, they're prepared and they're ready. And what it's done is it's really caused the whole church to kind of get activated in terms of thinking about playing a bigger role, especially in end times kinds of stuff. But they do other things too. But anytime you're investing in people, anytime you're investing in kingdom kinds of stuff like that, um, I, I think that's great. As far as the debt question goes, I don't think you can say that universally. It's okay or it's not okay. I think you got to take that question to the Lord.
Yeah, I think with that, people need to think about the difference of Old Testament where they're talking about charging interest to your neighbor, for something versus a
Usury
business.
tax.
Yes, that's a different thing than a business, in a sense, renting capital to use to invest into a business enterprise. It's a completely
Yeah.
different thing.
When I was in Reading, the other thing I did that helped the marketplace in Reading was I formed an angel investment group. There are about 20 of us that we put like $20,000 we put into a pool, and we use that pool as seed money to take these really great ideas. So it's the concept of a venture capitalist. You've heard that term. But we called ourselves angels, and we formed a group. The group's still going. They've invested in tens of 20s of different kinds of businesses up there. And that's a great way. We kind of all viewed it. Yeah, we'd like to get a return on our money. This isn't just charity. But what we were mostly trying to do was lift the economy, create jobs, benefit, and using our gifting to do that.
Okay, John Friel, why don't you unmute? You've got a couple questions on there. So rather than me just read them, why don't you get on and
Yes,
have
I'm
at it.
enjoying this topic. This is great. Got the wheels turning here. I had a question on the boot camp. When people pitch their ideas, Mike, did they pitch them to everyone and everyone kind of gave them feedback, or did they pitch them, like, say, to the panel of some of the business friends?
Yeah, that's a good question. I broke it down so that some of the buddies that I had teaching each took about 5, 6 guys, and they determined who was the best out of their group. And then we only had about 4 or 5 guys at the very end that pitched in front of everybody. So it was kind of a bake-off, if you will.
When pitching, was it just so that they could define their idea more, or was it kind of a way that?
They weren't there to raise money that day. We were giving them a practice, a role modeling or a hypothetical scenario where when it came time for them to go out and pitch their idea and try to raise some money potentially, or sell somebody on it, get somebody on the team, that they were had at least 1 or 2 times to practice it.
Great.
You'd be surprised how ideas that you put on paper when you stand up and talk don't always translate real well.
Which of course now we have a great. Now we have most everyone's watched. Okay, Shark Tank, right? So especially young people. Young people know that now, and that's a model for them, so they get that.
Yep.
Okay.
I had another question.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Is there anywhere that you can give us any additional topics that would interest marketplace people that you have found that are really?
Yeah, I'd go to that book that my buddy Bob Fraser wrote, Robert Fraser, Marketplace Christianity. He breaks it down into what kind of giftings people have, what kind of callings people have, and you'll get some really great ideas in there about topics as well. Same with, Ed Silvoso. If you don't follow Ed Silvoso, he would be one to start to follow. Ed's got a global ministry, and he has great testimonies, great ideas coming from all over the world in terms of how marketplace people are doing business as mission, how they're impacting their cities. He's just a real gatherer of really great miracle stories. The other one would be Andy Mason with Heaven in Business. And Andy has got unbelievable testimonies, unbelievable creative ideas. And Andy, we helped, my wife and I helped him get started as well. So he's really good.
Right. I want everybody to email us at info@pastorscoach.com your resources, and I'm going to put all this stuff into some notes. We don't have formal notes today, so that's what I'm going to do. So send us your ideas and your contacts, your resources of either courses, speakers, books, whatever related to this. I'm putting some as I can into the chat room. But I will actually compile all that, put it into notes, and it'll be in the course. And by the way, let me mention that. So this is the first call every masterclass, the first call of the month is free and open to everyone. The others you have to pay for, unless you're a member. And so a membership, our max membership, you have access to all the master courses all year, as well as many other courses on the website and assessments and lots of other, 2 coaching calls a year for free included in membership. But if you just want to get the 5-part series, we sign up for that, then you can, that'll also give you access to the recordings from each of these 5, as well as all the notes and all that. Okay, we had a question from Seb on what's the best way to learn more about Andy Mason. So
He's
Mike.
he's got a ministry called Heaven in Business. Just Google it and you're in. He's written some short little booklets as well, so you can watch what he's got on his, I haven't been on his website for a while, but you can watch what's there. He's really the repository. He's got this bowl and all these miracle stories of, God's goodness, God coming through, God's miracles are all, he's collecting those from all over the globe. And then he puts on these seminars or conferences where he gets people to have community, share, get activated. Andy also used to teach on how to dream, not nighttime dreams, but how to take the dreams that are in your heart and put a plan together to pursue those. So he's really a talented young guy that can put together both inspiration and activation.
Okay, and then very good. And then Rocky's got a question. So Rocky, unmute and go for it.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for everything. This is really, really good. Question for you here. You kind of hit my mind here when you talked about the young generation on the gig economy.
Yeah.
It kind of brings up a question today where the marketplaces might be going or where you might see it going. And then obviously, as we begin to continue to pastor churches and you raise up youth ministries, you come across a lot of youth that, mom and dad want me to go to college, and maybe one wants to go to a vocational school. And then they, make an appointment with the pastor, and you're sitting there and say, which way should you go? I do see there's a tremendous change going here. So with the gig economy and the way things are changing, the economy and the world in general, what would be your advice to pastors with upcoming generations on how to maybe stir these families in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, there's no one size fits all. Like,
Sure.
the way this college thing kind of, in my mind, got taken out of control was when the Clintons were in the White House. And they did a lot of great things, but one thing they did do that I didn't really agree with was they basically said a college education is a right, and we're going to fund everybody. We're going to give everybody to loans, and this is the way to go, and everybody's going to win if we do this. And they were flat out wrong. They were wrong. Not everybody's called to go to college, and they ended up straddled with this debt. Where do you live right now?
San Diego.
Okay, so you know what the debt is for going to college. I mean, it's like off the charts. It's like you have a mortgage on a house, but you have no house.
Right.
That's how significant it is, and everybody bought into that. So there's a guy out there. I don't know if he's Christian or not. A guy named Mike Rowe.
Okay.
Mike Rowe. He's the best resource out there for helping people come to a decision. Do I do college? Do I do vocation? Do I do trade? Do I do something else with my life?
Spell his last name, Mike. Mike, how do you spell his last name?
R-O-W-E, Mike Rowe.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. He used to have
a program called, The Dirtiest Jobs.
That guy, right, okay.
He is the best spokesman right now for alternatives to going to college.
Right, so that's micro.com. Okay, all right.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we've got, all right, Adrian just put something in the chat window there. Okay, more questions? Or just unmute yourself and ask, don't be shy. What about other countries? I want to hear, Germany, Brazil, South Africa, whoever, Canada. Thoughts, questions? Okay, we've got a question from Seb. I'm not quite sure. What is your take on these apps that get your working? Seb, can you explain that a little more?
What is your take on, like, there's these apps like Instacart, and are these gigs that are actually beneficial, or set you back below minimum wage kind of jobs?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with all of them that are out there, but it takes a lot of different. It takes variety makes the world go round. So I don't really have a strong opinion about that. What I will tell you is that because of my background, I'm always interested in professionalism, excellence, doing the hard work. Um, Anything that is a get rich quick scheme, or anything that sounds too good to be true, or anything that offers you this incredible shortcut, generally I advise people to stay away from it. So I'm not a big fan of multi-level marketing. I'm not a big fan of pyramids. I'm not a big fan of, some of those that they promise you the world. And, because so much of those depend upon you exposing your relationships just for the purpose of profitability. And I'm a big believer in relationships are sacred. Relationships are, to be, guarded and cherished. And, I'm from a different school on that one. I think that I protect my relationships. It's rare that I try to exploit them so that somebody can get rich. And so I don't know if that even answers your question, because I'm frankly not that aware of some of those apps out there.
Right now, Seb, are you talking about apps to help people to create a business? I'm not quite clear on the question.
No, like, for example, there's a dog walking. You can all of these gigs that are on these apps, so you could sign up, and then you can also be a Uber driver. These businesses that seem to be tied into using your phone to get all of these kind of services going.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's never been a time easier to launch a business and to run a business than now. So there are many productivity apps, many apps for having your own store or shopping cart or being on Amazon or whatever. So all that's made it infinitely easier now to become an entrepreneur, really launch anything.
As you're on your life journey, there may be times where you need to supplement your income by being an Uber driver. Cool. That's okay. Or being a dog walker because you're going to school for a season, especially for young people. I mean, some of that is just filler stuff. And to be honest with you, you learn a lot of life skills doing some of that stuff. You learn what you don't want to do for the rest of your life, by doing some of those menial jobs. I had to do that when I was in school. I had to kind of work my way through school, and I learned real quick what I didn't like to do.
Maybe talk, Michael, about we all want more and more convenience. So there is a lot more shifting to those services that do it actually attempt to address those areas.
Right. Well, here's the best story I can tell you. When the gold rush was on up in Alaska and even in California in the 1840s, the majority of the people that made money were not the gold miners. It was the people selling shovels and axes.
And Levi's, right?
Levi's. That'll tell you something right there. That, yeah, by you turning over something to them, they're the ones really making the money. You're not really making the money. But it might be that that's what you need to fill the gap for a season. But I would say aim higher.
Okay, other questions? We are over the time here. So Mike, how long can you stay?
I got about another 5.
Okay, all right, another 5 minutes and we'll wrap it up. So now's your chance. Come on.
I have a question.
Yep, go for it.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for the talk. Sorry about that. I have something in the background. Sorry. My question is, I'm kind of more in this gig economy, just a young kind of entrepreneur, but I also do some ministry as well. And my business helps guys get free of pornography addiction. I'm wondering how you advise people on when to make a transition from doing something part-time and on the side to something full-time. When do you know it's time to do that?
Wow, that's a great question. And it depends. But what I will say is, if I detailed to you my life story, by the way, I have a book. It's called Prosperity with Purpose. And it's kind of my journey and the lessons learned along the trail. I don't have one to hold up. It's in
I'm
the
gonna
other
put the
room.
link in here. Let me find it.
I'm not a promoter, but let's see. Let me go back to the question here. I got sidetracked by talking about my book. If you went back into my story, oh, here's what it is. It's a big part of my success, and I'm still growing, learning. I haven't arrived yet, but a big part of what's been work for me is that I hear from the Lord, I obey the Lord. And sometimes when you walk through a door in obedience, there's 10 more doors open up to you. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that some of the gig stuff, some of those doors that you feel like the Lord has said, do this for now, like the pornography, resource that you have, go through that door, take it as far as you can. If the Lord breathes on that, you're blessed. If he doesn't, there may be 10 other doors that he's going to open up to you, and you're going to have a much wider choice. That's kind of the way my life has progressed, is, trying to hear, then obey, even radical obedience. Guys, I left Walt Disney as a senior vice president to move back to Omaha to do a telecom startup, because I went to a Promise Keeper event, and the message I got at that event, this was in the early 90s, was ask your wife what her dreams are. I really felt the Lord download that. A speaker actually said those words, and I really felt the Lord downloading to me, do it. I went home, talked to my wife. She said, if you're really asking me what my dreams of my heart are, I want to move back to Omaha, where my parents need me, and I want to have more kids. We had 2 teenagers at that point. I was like, sorry I asked, almost. But what I did was I turned it over to the Lord, because I really felt like he was on it. And I committed what a lot of people said was career suicide, because I was being groomed to be a top guy within the Walt Disney Company. And I took a chance, and I turned it over to the Lord. And by me walking through that door, 2 years later, we sell that company. I'm one of the senior guys in this company. We sell it for $14 billion. And then the next door opened. We started another telecom company called Level 3. We built it so the internet traffic had a platform. Prior to that, this was 1997. All the internet was running off of a pair of twisted copper wires, guys. And some of you young people have no clue how bad that was. But those of us that lived through it, it was just hard. You couldn't really be on the internet. So we laid the foundation, the backbone, the switches, the fiber, the routers, built the software. And to this day, a majority of the internet traffic in the civilized first country world runs on our backbone. The largest bandwidth user in the world is Netflix, and they run off our backbone. So my point is, obey, go through the first door. If he blesses that one, great. If he doesn't, I think other doors are going to open.
Now, Mike, you're a superstar. Give us an example of one time where it where it failed and you learned through that, okay?
Yeah. So, I was living in Santa Barbara, California. I didn't really have a purpose. I was kind of, our daughter had just died. I was struggling with some health issues. I was kind of wandering around a little bit, and I decided to get in the game. So I formed this company with this other guy. He was from Denmark, and we started the company. And my wife had some checks on who this guy was and what his motives were and everything. And so I poured a lot of money into this company. We did some amazing things for a short period, but some of his character deficiencies started to show up, and it was a train wreck, because we were partners, and I missed it. Part of it was I hungered so much that I didn't. There's an old saying, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie White Men Can't Jump, but it's like you go find a game, a basketball game. Okay, that's kind of a common thing. Let's go find a game. Let's get in a game. And I went and tried to get involved in a gang instead of the Lord bringing the game to me. And that's the lesson I learned out of that. Lost a lot of money.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the thing. We're talking entrepreneurship, and it's a lot of risk, and it's not all.
Yeah, the
it is-
entrepreneurial skill, by the way, is one of the rarest skills, you guys. It's like a 1 in 1,000 habit. So if you live in a city like I live, there's about 800,000 people in Omaha. If you did that ratio, that means there's only about 8,000 entrepreneurs, or 800. I can't remember. How's the math going? Yeah. 1 in 1,000. So like 800 true entrepreneurs that have that gift. There's a lot more entrepreneurial businesses than that. So it's not for everybody. But creatives is a whole nother area that I am really turned on by. So I've written a book. I'm the head of a movie studio in Hawaii, the founder of YWAM. His son is named David Cunningham. I'm the chairman of his board. We make movies. I've been the head of a record label. And I've been around, my kids are all creatives. I love creative people, but they are so misunderstood. They are so lonely. They are so kind of ostracized in some ways. And I love that. I love that. So entrepreneurs and creatives that's where all my energy is going right now.
So good. Okay, well, let's do this. Mike, why don't you give us the honor of praying for everybody and praying about entrepreneurs, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Okay, well, Lord, we've talked about a lot of things this morning, and there's been just such great questions that have come up. And Lord, I would pray that if there's a little spark there, that you're going to fan that into a flame for some of these churches or nonprofit organizations, that they would embrace this. They try some new things, Lord. I just feel like the future, I can't remember how the scripture goes, Lord, but it's the future things are going to surpass the things of the past. And that's what I pray for, Lord, that you're going to give us in the night, during the day, new ideas of how to get all this talent and all these resources of these marketplace people back, re-engaged, harnessed, pointed in the right direction, empowered. I just pray, Lord, that you're going to use the church to do some of that, and that all boats are going to get lifted, and that the kingdom's going to be increased in all of our communities. Lives are going to be touched. You're going to get the glory. That it's going to be a new way, Lord. Make a way where there doesn't seem to be a way in some of our lives right now. I just pray that there'd be a willingness and openness to try some new things. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.